a few different factors that contributed to me like starting on the streaming beat. I think one of them was sort of like in the mid 2010s while I was a few years into full-time freelance music journalism, like just starting to get a little bit bored with like what you could do as a freelance music journalist. As like you
Yeah.
write record reviews, you interview a band when they have a new album coming out, you contribute like 100-word blurbs to like the 30 best songs of March 2014 or whatever. And I always had been like kind of interested in trying to do more like investigative journalism or just writing that kind of talked about structural issues, and also have for a lot of my life been interested in journalism that like holds corporate power
Yeah.
accountable. Like, you know, another sort of like part of my formative years growing up on Long Island was that when I was growing up on Long Island, there was a Walmart that opened in Massapequa when I was in high
I
school.
remember, yeah.
And I made this like, it was like a really big research project. And like part of my identity was like protesting the Walmart that was growing up in Massapequa. So, it's like something I've always kind of been interested in. Anyway, yeah, I remember like in 2016, I just like made this list of like three story ideas that I wanted to work on that I thought were kind of like music related, but also more investigative. And one
Yeah.
of them was like researching the multi-agency task force in New York City that was shutting down venues. And I wrote that. And then like the other one was like Spotify playlists. And I wrote that. And then I just sort of like never got to the third one because I just ended up writing about Spotify playlists for 10 years.
Yeah.
But so I wrote this one piece for the blog of this nonprofit called Cash Music that was sort of like this nonprofit that was giving musicians open source code to build their own digital tools to interface with their fan bases without needing corporate infrastructure. So it would give them like open source code to like make a newsletter or a shopping cart on their website or something like that. And then they started a blog where they were like hiring writers to do stories. And that was where I wrote the first piece that I did on Spotify playlists and the influence of major labels on
Yeah.
like the front page of Spotify, basically. And then that made its way to the Baffler. And one of the editors from the Baffler reached out to me and asked if I had any other ideas around Spotify. So I sent them like five ideas that I had, and they responded and they were like, "What if you just made this one essay?" So then I ended up doing this like big kind of like holistic piece of
Yes.
Spotify for them in 2017. And it was while writing like those two pieces that I had like this huge list of stories when I realized that it was really more kind of like a beat than necessarily
Yeah.
a piece. So I ended up writing a lot for the Baffler over the years that followed. Like I did a piece on how gender bias is reproduced in algorithmic recommendations on playlists. And I did a piece on like the partnerships that Spotify was starting with marketing companies to like package and sell mood data to them and stuff like that. And then I guess it was like in 2019, I started working on a book proposal to try to like gather these pieces and build on them. But it wasn't, then the pandemic started, and I kind of like put it on pause because I someone who found it like really hard to just like continue on with this kind of stuff for a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, 2021, I kind of more seriously picked it back up. And then we sold the book in 2022. And I think that, like, the thing that gets you interested in writing about a subject isn't always necessarily like the thing that keeps you interested enough in it to
Yeah.
write a book about it. So I feel like when I first started writing about Spotify, I was really interested in like the user experience and like kind of thinking about it through this more basic media literacy lens. Like, what are you looking at when you open these platforms? How are the major labels and brands and moneyed interests influencing people's taste in music, the like information ecology around music. But then obviously there's a huge like labor dimension to the story as well.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of like what kept me interested in it.
Yeah.
Because, in 2020, when the pandemic happened, there was sort of like a resurgence of music labor organizing, especially amongst independent musicians. There are these new groups like the Music Workers Alliance and United Musicians and Allied Workers. The latter group started this campaign called Justice at Spotify, where they were sort of like organizing musicians all over the world to try to hold Spotify accountable around many of the issues that I'd been writing about already. So like when I first started writing about Spotify, it was almost impossible to even like get a musician to go on the record because artists were so afraid to sort of like speak out against these companies and afraid of the backlash of never being on a Spotify playlist again.
Yeah.
Because that was real. Like, I heard
Yeah.
these stories of musicians being like, my manager got an email because I posted this critical thing on Twitter and they want me to
Yeah.
my tweet. Otherwise, they're not gonna like release, like this is
Yeah.
real.